Welcome to my ranking of the Death Wish films. I have watched this entire franchise since Christmas, all 6 films, helped by the fact that I got this on Christmas Day, the Blu-ray collection for the first 5 films. I don't think you can get one that's got all 6 on it. So what I had to do is watch the first 5 with this Blu-ray set, and the 6th film with Bruce Willis I just rented on Amazon Prime for about £3.50. Which is fine, because I got the first 5 films for free, because it was a present. So, pretty cheap deal on the whole, and I thoroughly enjoyed my overall experience. There's some really cool films in this series. 1 or 2 dodgy ones as well, we'll get into those. I'll quickly show you the discs on the inside. They've been a little bit lazy with the first one. I think they've just reissued the original Blu-ray release. It's just this silver disc, but all the others, they've got some pretty cool pictures on the discs. 2, 3, and then 4 and 5. So let's get into it, starting with the one that I consider to be the weakest in this franchise. So yeah, this one's the weakest of the bunch and a bit unnecessary, to be honest. They made a lot of the Death Wish films in the 80s. There was a big clump of them that came out between like 82 and 87, I think. That run of 2, 3 and 4. And then there was a big gap until the 5th one came out. This was a weird reprisal because it came out like in the middle of the 90s. Brosnan was in his 70s by this point, and I don't think they had much money for this one. I'm pretty sure that it was a TV movie, and you can tell that the budget's not that great. At one point in the story, I spotted a New York plate on a car, and I thought, whoa, they're trying to claim that this film is set in New York? I don't think so. The whole film looks like it's set in some really generic city, God knows where, possibly in Canada, because I know a lot of the actors in this were Canadian for some bullshit reason. It certainly doesn't look like it's set in New York. Some of the earlier films are meant to be set in New York, and you can tell that they actually are because you can see distinctive New York landmarks. Not here, but that's not the film's biggest problem. The main villain's pretty good. He's played by a guy called Michael Parks, who I remember from the Kill Bill films. He's a very good actor, and you can tell he's a good actor from watching this, but he just doesn't have much to work with in the script. His henchmen are just complete buffoons. They're like these really comical Italians. They're just not very frightening at all. And the plot, there's just not much to it. It's established very early on that Kersey has a big issue with this gangster guy who is the ex-husband of the woman Kersey is now dating. But then there's nothing for the story to do for like the longest time until it's time for the big shootout at the end. It's just spinning its wheels and inserting loads of scenes that just feel like padding. The film is 96 minutes. It probably should have been about 80. Just cut a lot of the fat off, make it shorter, and I would have found it more enjoyable if they'd have done that. I don't like the way that Kersey kills people in this. Kersey's meant to kill people with a small caliber firearm that he keeps in his jacket pocket. That is the character, but in this film they're obsessed with having him kill people in really elaborate ways, and they're not even that enjoyable to watch. So at one point he buys a toy football and puts explosive in it and then uses a remote control to send it into this guy's house. It's like, no. At another point he kills a guy by poisoning his cannoli. Paul Kersey, a poisoner? That's just not the character at all. So it's a little bit frustrating that they've strayed so far away from what Death Wish originally was. I do like his girlfriend in this one. So it's a bit of an in-joke, I guess, that in every single Death Wish film he has a new partner at the start of it. They're always these gorgeous women who are like 20, 30 years younger than Charles Bronson. So in this film, Bronson was 73 when he filmed it, but the age of the actress who is meant to be his girlfriend is about 40. Massive age gap, but they just play it as if it's like not a thing in the slightest. At one point, his girlfriend says to him, "Oh, I'm so glad that you're in my life. My daughter, she's wanted stability. She's wanted a father figure." I'm thinking, you do know that this guy's 73. You might not be a father figure for very long. The actress who plays this woman, Leslie Ann Down, probably my favourite of the Kersey's girlfriends from the series. That's the only thing that this film can say is the best. I'm probably a little bit biased because it's a British actress. Opinions will differ on the quality of the various partners of Kersey throughout the series. But on the whole, this film is just really weak, and it was very dull to get through. In the future, I mean, I'll do another Death Wish marathon, a few years from now, but I will probably just watch 1 to 4, I've got to be honest. This one's bad as well, to be fair, but at least it's entertaining all the way through, something which I cannot say about Death Wish 5. But the trouble with Death Wish 3 is that it very much strays into the so bad that it's good territory. I said that the fifth film had strayed so far from the original concept that it was a little bit uncomfortable. This film has done that as well, albeit in a different way. I mean, the action in this film is so over the top. We are so far past the original concept at this point. I mean, this film's like A Bad Day in Bosnia. He's using rocket launchers and Desert Eagles and massive big cannons and things. I'm thinking to myself, what happened to the guy who just went around with his small caliber pistol from the first film and took out muggers and punks? I mean, the end of this film is like the end of Commando almost, but with Charles Bronson, and it's set in New York. Oh yeah, an interesting aspect to this series, by the way, is that all the odd-numbered films are set in New York and all the even-numbered films are set in LA. So at the beginning of this one, he rolls back into New York because it's an odd-numbered film. And I've got to say, the first act in this one is actually really good. The storyline is set up very well. So there's a problem between the residents of a neighbourhood and this local gang. It's a very big gang, as we find out later in the film. And the villain is very clearly established. His animosity with Kersey is very well established. And I was enjoying it at this point. Then the second act comes around and it's just a muddle. Like with Death Wish 5, there's just not enough story to sustain the runtime. So we get all these fudged scenes in the middle of the film that just feel like padding. Kersey gets his new girlfriend. He's not with her from the start in this one. For some reason, it's like a reporter woman and she's just kind of magnetised to Kersey from a very early stage. I don't know why. I don't know what he's doing that makes women 2 decades younger than him go all gooey-eyed, but this woman's all over him like a rash, and they kill her off halfway through because they've got nothing else to do with the story. It's not a very convincing relationship on the whole. And then we get to the finale. Wow, I did not see this coming. It's like the shoot-'em-up to end all shoot-'em-ups. New York just becomes this weird war zone where no cop dare go. Kersey's just bouncing from one street to another. It's like something out of a Western because you've got all these punks on the top of buildings and they're shooting down and he's just shooting up at them and then they'll fall down, you know, like those cowboys would do in like a Western town, because in those really old style Westerns, every time somebody got shot on top of a building, they'd always fall off the building. They wouldn't just collapse and die on top of the building. That happens here a lot and it's just carnage. It's like, it's so over the top, and at one point Kersey's got like this massive gun. He's just mowing people down. There's cop cars driving around corners and just getting blown up, and it's literally like we've walked into the middle of Sarajevo. It's, like I said at the start of this particular bit, it's entertaining. It's not particularly good. I just kind of shook my head watching this film and thought, I'm not sure if I should be embarrassed that I'm enjoying this or not, but there we go. Death Wish 3 is my number 5 today. This franchise follows a similar trajectory to the Rocky franchise. So the first 2 Rocky films are quite down-to-earth, gritty, and then with the third one, they kind of make it a bit more Hollywoodized. We get the beginning of what I call the popcorn years with Rocky, and a similar thing sort of happens with Death Wish. You get these 2 semi-realistic films that kick things off. And then in the third film, we've got Paul Kersey running around with a rocket launcher and nobody arrests him. It all gets a bit chaotic from that point forwards. So this is the second and last of the more down-to-earth ones. It doesn't get off to a good start, though. The start of this film almost completely mirrors the start to the original film, and that was a big problem for me. I was like, why are we doing this all over again? So Kersey's girlfriend at the start of this one was his real-life wife, Jill Ireland, but the fact that she's really badly brutalised at the hands of these new set of punks wasn't my issue, really. It was the fact that Kersey's daughter's back, who was in the first film. Now, in the first one, she was really badly beaten up and it destroyed her mentally to the point where her marriage ended and she had to go to a sanatorium. I really felt for her. At the start of this film, she sort of recovered and then the script sort of makes her go through it all again, except this time she gets impaled and dies. I didn't really want to see this character go through that again and then die, so this was a big sort of issue for me at the start of this film. Plus, we're just recycling the same plot that we've already seen. But once the film gets going and Kersey starts going after these punks, things really start to pick up, and I really enjoyed the rest of the movie. What this film does differently to the first one is that in the first film, Kersey could not identify who his enemies were, so he just had to go around killing randoms. This time around, he does manage to find out who the bad guys are, and so he's able to go after them. He's got like a little hit list thing that he uses, and it's a lot of fun. The shootouts are a little bit more elaborate this time than they were in the first film, but not too much so. I really enjoyed them this time, and Lawrence Fishburne's one of the punks. He looks very, very young. There's one great sequence where Kersey has to stalk the bad guys on a bus, and they end up having a really big shootout in this woodland area. It's really great. And the final fight in a hospital, it looks like Charles Bronson was really having to put some effort in for that. It's a really good final fight to close the film. So after a slow start, this is a pretty decent Death Wish film, and I'm a little bit sentimental for this one as well because it was the first one of these that I ever saw as a kid. So finally we've arrived at the Bruce Willis one, and to my surprise this was actually pretty damn good. I wasn't expecting it to be. It's not got a good reputation, this film, but I thought it was a good retelling of the original story. This film goes back to the original idea. It really goes back to basics, and because it's set in the modern day, you've got like people taking viral videos of the vigilante in action, which I thought was a cool new thing. There's a bit of humour in there, so Kersey goes to a gun store to get some guns, and there's like a blonde behind the counter doing this really impassioned sales pitch, and there's one or two other moments that made me chuckle as well. But the violence is very well staged. It feels very gritty. When people get shot in this film, it feels very bloody and satisfying, but there's nothing that's too over the top. There's no rocket launchers or anything like that. This film puts its own spin on the original 1974 film. It sets it in Chicago. So finally we get that Death Wish film in Chicago, which we were it was sort of hinted we might get that with Death Wish 2, and then they decided to move Kersey to LA instead. This time we get a Chicago film, and you can tell it's in Chicago, thankfully. And also, Kersey's now a doctor. At first, when I realised that, I was like, oh, come on, why can't you just make him an architect again? But actually, when the film went on, it sort of made sense for the story that he would be a doctor in this one. It really did play into the tale a little bit. And I think Bruce Willis is all right in this. He plays the character in a very understated way, but I liked him more as the film went on. I was a little bit frustrated by how much he was lacking enthusiasm in some of the early scenes. But once he got into the mindset of a guy who's lost his wife, then I think Bruce Willis's quality does sort of come to the fore eventually in this, and I just really enjoyed it. I thought it was really good, and it is better than most of the Bronson ones. You know, I'm not sure I wanted it to be better than most of the Bronson ones, but it is. But there are two films that it cannot beat. So let's find out which ones those are. The fact that this film turned out to be good was an even bigger surprise to me than the fact that the Bruce Willis one is quite good. After watching Death Wish 3, I really feared the worst with number 4. I strained my memory to try and remember what exactly happened in number 4. It had been a long time since I'd seen it, but to my surprise, it turned out to be really, really good. A big improvement on number 3. It's still as cartoony as number 3. It's still really over the top. It still has dozens and dozens of kills in it, but it's way more entertaining. And the smart thing that it does is take Kersey away from the punks and the muggers of the first 3 films. This time around, he's trying to stop drug dealers because the daughter of the new girlfriend he's got at the start of this one gets killed with a cocaine overdose. So with the help of this guy who sponsors him, he decides to end these 2 massive gangs in LA who control all the local cocaine supply. It's a bit of a retread of the first Dollars film, A Fistful of Dollars, in terms of its plot. You know, Kersey sort of playing these 2 rival companies against each other. But there are lots of twists in this film. There's a good twist right near the end. It turns out there's a 3rd criminal gang that Kersey has to take down. At one point, Kersey tries to pretend to be a waiter to sort of infiltrate this one gang, and you think to yourself, oh, okay, well, he's going to be in this gang for quite a lot of the film, and then he'll get found out towards the end. No, he gets found out quite early on because, you know, he's no spy. He's just Paul Kersey, a regular dude. So I like the fact that the story didn't try and make him out as this super infiltrator. He was discovered very early on. It's quite amusing. But all the way through this film, there are just so many great action sequences that, and each one is different from the last. At one point, Kersey has to go into a fish factory where secretly they're producing cocaine, and he shoots loads of guys, blows the place up. At one point, he walks into a video store, shoots a couple of guys. He goes into a restaurant at one point with wine bottles with bombs inside them. This one guy shoots, and the guy falls on top of like a cable car thing and gets electrocuted. And then at the end, he blows a guy up with a grenade launcher. This is secretly one of the best action films of the 80s, probably. I was quite blown away by it. All the way through, I was like, thinking, oh, okay, is that the last great bit that we're going to get? And then there was some other great action moment coming just after it. It's just wild 80s action entertainment. It is as silly as number 3, but number 3 is really repetitive. It's got nothing, there's nothing imaginative about it. It's like Michael Winner he just had no ideas for number 3 except put Kersey in the middle of a war-torn New York high street and get him to point guns at punks, and boring. But there are so many imaginatively creative situations in number 4 that, yeah, I really, really enjoyed this. I'd really look forward to watching this one again in the future. So yeah, the original film is the best. Sorry to be a little bit boring, but sometimes the original just is the best film. And you have to acknowledge that. This is a damn good movie. It does a very natural progression of somebody who would go from being a widow into being somebody who would walk around with a gun. Kersey goes to Arizona not long after his wife dies in this film to sort of find himself. And he meets this guy who gets him into guns, but for us, the viewer, it's a nice change of scenery. And when he comes back, he's still not that keen on picking up a firearm. He puts coins into a sock and goes out just swinging it like that. And then finally, he gets his little pistol thing, and what follows, the shootouts in the street at night, they're just very well done. It all feels like a very real tale that plays out. There's nothing over the top about it. It just feels like a really good story. And the sad irony about the whole thing is the fact that we don't ever get the moment where Kersey gets to face down the guys who actually killed his wife. They just get away scot-free. That's the weird thing about this movie. Jeff Goldblum plays one of those punks. It's an early role for him. So he gets to force Kersey's wife to give him a blowjob and then gets away with it, bastard. And so it's kind of hollow for Kersey in a way, because he's just going around killing all these random people and they've got nothing to do directly with why he's there in the first place. It's not a lot of films would do that these days. I think they would feel like they have to have that revenge aspect put into it. So this film was quite brave in a way, and you get that really good ending as well where Kersey's finally caught by the police and they give him a deal, basically. You leave New York now, we won't put you in jail. So he gets taken to Chicago and he does the little glint at the camera at the end to finish things off, which is kind of nice. And it's sort of ironic looking back now, because the deal was that he never goes back to New York, but he does for Death Wish 3 and Death Wish 5. Number 3 is running around destroying the whole place with all kinds of weapons and stuff, but taking Death Wish, the original film, as just its own thing. It's a really good film. It's not a masterpiece. Let's not go over the top, but it's just a really, really, really good film, and for me, quite comfortably the best in this franchise. Although I'm probably a little bit more entertained by number 4 on the whole, I've got to say. So there we are. I had a lot of fun with this. I've really enjoyed going through this series over the past couple of weeks or so. Do let me know what you think about these films and how you would order them. And I guess we'll wrap things up for today. So until next time, I will see you. Bye-bye.